Moving now to Medhansh Kumar to close the case for the opposition and the debate as a whole. Medhansh is a second-year student reading law at Trinity College. He won the right to speak through open audition. Medhansh, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Lara. Ladies and gentlemen, so far we've heard rather a lot about capitalism and communism and the varying form of governments in between. I propose to bring a new dimension, to move beyond political theory and move to history. Let me remind this House about something that happened probably before most of our parents were born. Let me talk to you about a little something called the Yom Kippur War, which was a conflict between Israel and Palestine, very non-controversial subject, but it was an Israel-Arab-Palestinian, yes? Well, not really, but... Well, I'm in protected time.
Anyway. You don't have to.
Okay, go on.
I was going to say, this is just factual correction. It was not a conflict between Israel and Palestine. It was a conflict between Israel, Egypt, Transjordan, and Syria.
Which was related to the Palestinian cause, and there were, in fact, Palestinian fighters involved. Anyway, the point is, as a result of support offered to the State of Israel, there was an oil embargo placed upon a number of Western countries, which resulted in a rise in oil and energy prices, and in fact, to pretty damaging economic repercussions. My point, ladies and gentlemen, is this. When you have a war in Europe, you are going to experience higher energy prices. Now, it is true that the UK only imports about 3 or 4% of its natural gas from Russia. No, thank you. The point, however, is this. When you have a global scarcity in the oil markets, as happened in the Yom Kippur War, as happened when Saudi Arabia cut production of oil in the recent past, you are going to experience price rises in fuel markets because of the fundamental laws of demand and supply, which sadly we cannot change unless we turn this entire planet into some version of the Paris Commune. The second point I want to make is this. No, thank you. The second point I want to make is this. We've consistently heard from side proposition that private companies are inflicted by short-termism. Fair enough. To which I ask, is the government of the day not inflicted by short-termism? Are we seriously saying that an administration... yes?
We wouldn't be asking the government to directly run things. Jacob Rees-Mogg would not be in charge of the national grid. We would have well-run organisations operating in the public interest and returning a profit back into the services.
Right. So a number of issues. With that, admittedly idealistic point, and that could potentially have worked, but the legal position in this country has changed. After the Thatcher administration and through the administration of Tony Blair, you see the development of what is called the new public model, and that means that even bodies which are ostensibly owned by the state run in substantial ways like private companies and have limited amounts of government oversight. And the current structure of administrative law in the United Kingdom is such that any nationalized grid, even though, as earlier speakers on my side have pointed out, that isn't really what we're talking about here, but any sort of nationalized grid-type infrastructure would operate in that fashion, and so it would not be susceptible to the sort of control exerted by administrative law through the procedures of judicial review that we see today, with bodies of a more public character. However, even... no, thank you. Yep.
As has been raised, electricity grid is a natural monopoly. Why should shareholders receive monopoly profits and dividends instead of this money being returned to the public?
Right. So first off, the concept of natural monopoly. A natural monopoly is an industry with extremely high capital and input costs. It's an industry with sunk costs. And of course, the national grid is an example of a natural monopoly, but so are a number of other things, including the production of oil, which is manifestly, oil and gas, which is manifestly not nationalized across the world. Now, the reason why the national grid should not be nationalized and why those alleged profits should not pass into the public domain is this. There is no proof that those profits will still be made once things pass into public hands. Now, it is true that there are empirical studies, as pointed out, no, thank you, that there are empirical studies which suggest that there are no changes in efficiency. But what I think those studies, as a macrocosmic overview of data, don't discuss enough are structural factors. Now, it is true that each economy has a different structure, and each economy's layout, in a way, is different. Now, Britain is said to be an economy with an advanced services sector. However, those services aren't necessarily in the line of tourism. A lot of Britain's work is in the development of the life sciences and in the development of financial technology. Those are things that unfortunately require energy. And what that leads us into is a system, yes.
So if we have to pay the public debts of these companies, so we're paying the debt of about 150, why are we not entitled to some of the profit? There seems to be a kind of logical flaw with your argument about the ethical of dividends. We already pick up their debts. So why on earth can we not profit when things go well as a nation?
Well, you're assuming that paying off those debts is a question of consent. It is not a question of consent. The fact of the matter is this. Britain is a country with a sovereign parliament. A sovereign parliament is a parliament that can make any law it likes. Tomorrow, by a bare majority, one vote in the House of Commons, using the procedure in the Parliaments Act 1911 and 1949, the UK Parliament could decree that all private property vests in the Prime Minister, and there's not a damn thing the courts or the citizens of this country could do without resorting to armed insurrection. So the idea that there is somehow this notion of public consent which backs up every single act of the state is demonstrably false. And the related argument to that is this. Whenever the debts of companies are picked up, that is an action of the executive government. That is the action of people who have been voted to power by citizens of the UK and such persons as are empowered to vote in UK elections. So in some sense, that too is a public. Now, if you accept the view that government is a matter of public consent, which I don't, I think it's a power relation, but if you accept that government is a matter of public consent, you have to accept that the public, whatever that notional body means, has consented to the paying off of those debts. If you're a realist and you believe that government is a power relation, you have to realize that the public has no real ability to question the exercise of power once a government is elected and once it holds on to effective executive power. If I can move on now to a related argument, and that argument is one of opportunity cost. The facts of the matter are this. There is a climate crisis, and that is something that is going to require both tremendous government expenditure and tremendous private sector expenditure if Britain wants to get out of it unscathed. What that means is that there is an opportunity cost to every single government decision to buy something or to sell something. And when the government decides to nationalise the grid, it can do that in one of two ways. Either it can engage in coercive action. That is to say, Parliament may pass an act along the lines of this. The national grid is the property of the UK government. There will be no compensation paid to whoever owns it as of this moment, which is something that Parliament can legally do, at which point confidence in the UK economy and financial system will collapse even further than it does now, and there will be devastating economic consequences. The second thing the government can do is this. It can buy it, at which point it will have to confront the reality that in an economy where wages have been largely stagnant except for the top of the economic pyramid, and where wages are not rising in line with productivity, and where wealth is increasingly being offshored by persons donating to the interests that hold power in today's society, governments are going to have to deal with a massive debt situation at a time where they're cutting spending on, amongst other things, education and schools. And that will mean that the opportunity cost of these things is going to be in the form of public welfare. When the alternative foregone is public welfare, that's not a great situation to be in. Now, there is a solution which can exist while the grid is still unnationalized, and that solution is to extend the legal scope of judicial review, which is a procedure used to regulate administrative action, and to impose stronger duties on Ofgem and on the regulators to act in the public interest. Now, the statutory, yes.
We've changed the regulation, I think, multiple times in the last 5 years alone. All of the new form of regulations failed. When is it finally time to start admitting that something is fundamentally wrong with the system and stop trying to tweak the window dressing around it?
Well, there is something fundamentally wrong with the system, and the thing that's fundamentally wrong with the system is that we're addressing Ofgem as a body which is independent, which is an independent regulator in the sense that it derives its power only from the government. What needs to be done with Ofgem is that it needs to be given independent power of its own on a statutory basis to actively and proactively intervene, to take suo motu cognizance of all sorts of issues, and to issue directions which have binding force, including serious private law sanctions, in order to extract financial remedies and impose financial costs and burdens upon private entities to a much greater extent. Give the regulator teeth. Now, the situation we have is this. You have a bunch of private companies, and you're regulating them with a watchdog over whose eyes has been tied a rather expansive wad of silk and whose teeth have been pulled out. Now, if you give the regulator slightly more power, it will work out. And the alternative to that, of course, is the straight running things, to which I have only two names to give you, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. Thank you.